hidden beneath the dense jungles of Southeast Asia, ran a lifeline that defied one of the most powerful military forces in history. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was not just a path through mountains and forests. It was the pulse of a nation determined to reunite its land. This is the story of ingenuity, sacrifice, and the human spirit that made the impossible possible. An American veteran said, "We could bomb every mile. We could watch it crumble under our firepower. But somehow, the enemy always kept moving. There was a rhythm to their endurance we could never break, a resilience that haunted every mission we flew." We carried not just weapons and rice, but the hopes of our families, our villages, and our nation. Each step through the mud, each bridge we rebuilt under fire was a promise we would not fail, that freedom was worth any sacrifice. This is the story of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a triumph of willpower and sacrifice. It is the story of men and women who carried not only weapons and rice through the jungle, but the heartbeat of a nation. It is a reflection on the human spirit's refusal to yield, even when surrounded by fire. In 1959, deep within the mist-covered mountains of North Vietnam, the newly formed 559th Transportation Group began tracing the first faint lines of what would become the Ho Chi Minh Trail. At first, it was little more than a dirt path winding through the True Son Range, a rugged, rain-soaked wilderness where leeches clung and rivers raged. But from that narrow track, a miracle of logistics would be born. The trail's purpose was simple, yet monumental: to move men, weapons, food, and hope into South Vietnam, to sustain a revolution in the shadows. By 1961, the path had grown into a vast, living organism, twisting through Laos and Cambodia. It was no longer a single road, but an evolving web, hidden beneath the jungle, branching endlessly, defying maps and logic. By 1972, this secret network stretched more than 12,000 miles, a labyrinth of roads, tunnels, rivers, and bridges connecting remote mountain outposts to the front lines in the south. It was as if the forest itself had become an army, sheltering its defenders beneath a green ocean of leaves. The ingenuity behind the trail was unmatched. Engineers wove camouflage from branches and vines, hiding convoys beneath triple-layered canopies so dense that even the most advanced American reconnaissance aircraft saw only untouched jungle. Truck headlights were dimmed with bamboo slats. Drivers navigated by memory, by instinct, or by the faint glow of the moon. When daylight came, movement ceased. Soldiers vanished underground, resting in earthen shelters dug deep into the mountain slopes. Even the smoke from cooking fires was filtered through long bamboo pipes that carried it away from aerial view, disappearing like breath into mist. To the U.S. pilots flying overhead, it seemed the jungle was empty. But beneath that silence, thousands of men and women were moving, an invisible army breathing in unison with the forest. Supplies were moved by every means imaginable. Trucks groaned along hidden roads, but when fuel ran low or paths were too narrow, bicycles took over. These were no ordinary bicycles. They were stripped, reinforced, and welded with bamboo braces, capable of hauling over 300 pounds of ammunition, rice, or fuel. Teenagers, some no older than 16, pushed these steel mules through knee-deep mud and monsoon rains, often for hundreds of miles. One courier recalled making 11 round trips through Laos before 1968. He said, "We walked until our feet bled. When the bombs fell, we lay flat and waited. Then we stood and kept pushing. The load was heavy, but so was our purpose." Among the most remarkable stories were those of the Trung Song Women's Corps, tens of thousands of young women who carried out the same back-breaking labor as their male counterparts. They dug trenches, repaired bombed bridges, carried supplies, and even manned anti-aircraft batteries. Many lived in the jungle for years without returning home, their youth traded for the endurance of war. One diary found decades later read, "We dug the earth with our hands when the shovels broke. We sang to keep our courage." Every crater was a reminder of our promise to finish what we began. Their laughter, mingling with the sound of distant bombing, became part of the jungle's song. Their strength became the spine of the trail itself. From 1965 to 1973, the U.S. unleashed an unrelenting bombing campaign over Laos and along the trail. Over 3 million tons of explosives. The jungle was shredded, rivers boiled, mountains scarred beyond recognition. Yet the supply lines continued. When bridges were destroyed, they were rebuilt overnight, sometimes dozens of times in a single week. Bamboo rafts and floating pontoons ferried trucks across rivers where no bridges remained. Fake trucks made of straw and logs were positioned as decoys to draw airstrikes away from the real convoys. Every crater became a reservoir. Every disaster became adaptation. The Americans measured success in bombs dropped. The Vietnamese measured it in kilometers gained. The trail, battered but alive, never stopped beating. Beneath the surface, a hidden civilization thrived. Underground hospitals treated the wounded, workshops repaired trucks and artillery. Storage bunkers held rice, ammunition, and fuel sealed against the damp. At night, lanterns flickered in makeshift operating rooms, their light filtered through cloth so it would not betray their position. Medics treated malaria, snakebite, shrapnel wounds, often with minimal supplies and no electricity. "We fought 2 wars, one medic said later, one against the Americans and another against disease." Some areas had 3 layers, a footpath above, a truck road beneath, and tunnels below that carried stretchers, supplies, and sometimes hope itself. By 1968, technology became America's new weapon. Project Igloo White deployed thousands of electronic sensors across the trail. Tiny machines designed to detect footsteps, engine vibrations, even body heat. But the North Vietnamese learned to outwit the invisible enemy. They hung buckets of water from trees to mimic human movement, sent herds of cattle down false routes, and built new paths overnight through unmonitored forest. The electronic battlefield became just another jungle to navigate, and once again, the trail adapted faster than the machines that hunted it. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was more than a logistical network. It was an embodiment of national will. Every porter, engineer, and soldier who stepped into that wilderness carried the dream of reunification. By the time Saigon fell in April 1975, the trail had transported over 1 million soldiers and hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies to the Southern Front. It had outlasted the world's most powerful air force, defied surveillance, and fueled a revolution that reshaped a continent. The jungle had sheltered not just an army, but the endurance of a people who refused to yield. Today, fragments of the Ho Chi Minh Trail still remain. Some have become paved highways, bustling with motorbikes and trade. Others lie buried under vines, reclaimed by the earth they once served. Bomb craters have turned into fish ponds, rusted trucks set half-swallowed by trees. In nearby villages, elders remember the hum of engines at midnight, the laughter of porters, the trembling of the ground when convoys passed. The jungle, once a battleground, is quiet now. But if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of footsteps, the rumble of wheels, and the whispers of those who carried a nation on their backs. The Ho Chi Minh Trail remains one of the greatest feats of human endurance ever recorded. Not built by machines or protected by walls, but sustained by belief. It reminds us that wars are not only fought with weapons or strategy, but with determination, creativity, and courage. It teaches that no amount of force can conquer the will to be free. Through the mud and the monsoon, through fear and exhaustion, they build not just a road, but a legacy. And through that legacy, the pulse of a nation still beats. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was not built of stone or steel, but of flesh and faith. It was carved by hands that refused to tremble, by people who believed that freedom was worth the impossible. It teaches us that the true power of a nation lies not in its weapons, but in its unity. The trail is gone now, swallowed by time, by forest, by the quiet forgiveness of nature. But its spirit remains. In every act of endurance, in every struggle for hope, the echo of those footsteps lives on. Because, in the end, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was not merely a road. It was a promise, and that promise still endures in the soil, in the rain, in the heartbeat of a nation that would not kneel. In the humid summer of 1966, the mountain roads near Thanh Hoa Province came alive with a new kind of convoy. Not trucks, not jeeps, but bicycles. Hundreds of them, their frames wrapped in bamboo, their spokes reinforced with melted scrap metal, their baskets overflowing with sacks of rice and ammunition. Among them was Nguyen Van Phu, just 17, the son of a farmer. His bicycle carried nearly 300 kilograms of supplies, more than 4 times his own weight. The soldiers jokingly called them steel elephants, beasts of burden for a war fought in silence. They moved mostly at night, following moonlight that barely pierced the canopy. During the day, they hid under tarps made of palm leaves, sleeping beside the road while the forest hummed with insects and distant artillery. When the mud was too thick, they pushed together in teams, grunting through the sludge, their sandals dissolving in the rain. When a wheel broke, they fixed it with vines or tied it with their belts. Phu later recalled, "We didn't fear the bombs as much as the hunger. Sometimes we ate rice soaked in rainwater, sometimes nothing. But we promised ourselves we would reach the south, even if our shadows had to drag the bicycles for us." By the end of the war, thousands of tons of supplies had moved south this way, on the backs of boys who never learned to ride the very machines they pushed. Their bicycles, rusted now and half swallowed by vines, still lie along forgotten trails. Silent reminders that sometimes history moves forward not on engines, but on faith. Hidden beneath 30 meters of rock and soil near the Laotian border, Field Hospital 14 was carved like a wound into the mountain. Inside its tunnels, Dr. Lê T. Tuyet, only 24 years old, led a team of medics who worked in the dark. There was no electricity, only oil lamps and candles. The air smelled of damp clay, iodine, and earth. Every day, stretchers arrived carrying the wounded, porters with broken spines, drivers burned by napalm, soldiers coughing from malaria. When supplies ran out, they tore sheets into bandages and boiled them over fire. When anesthesia was gone, they sang. Tuyet would hum folk songs from her hometown to calm the patients. One soldier, his leg shattered beyond saving, whispered, "Your voice is the only thing that doesn't hurt." During one bombardment, the mountain itself shook. Rocks fell from the ceiling, the lamps went out. But Tuyet and her team continued the operation by the faint red glow of a single lantern. She later said, "The bombs didn't stop the bleeding. Neither did fear, so we worked." In 2 years, the small hospital treated over 1,700 wounded, often with no more than herbs, gauze, and willpower. Today, the mountain remains, silent and green. Villagers say you can still find the entrance if you listen closely, a narrow cave mouth covered in vines, where the echoes of whispered songs still drift through the stone.